Little carryover from the budget week last week was, of course, Peter Dutton and the speech that he gave in reply. Thursday night at 7:30 meant there were quite a few eyeballs that were starting to move towards football. So just in case you missed it, one of the many things that he talked about was the ability for people that are currently getting the dole to be able to work on top of getting the dole for longer than the current government says they're allowed to do it. That way you'd be able to top up the money rather than just increase the dole. Put simply, if you only want the dole, that's a certain amount of money. If you want more than the dole, you have to work on top of the dole to still get the dole. This is what he said.
I think the better approach is to allow people on a job seeker payment to work, say, 5 or 10 hours a fortnight. It would give them a lot of extra money in their pocket compared to the $40 that the government is offering. We want to get them off welfare and into work.
Now, interestingly, the current government has not said bad idea, no, go away, like they do about nuclear power, one of the things that will end up being a fight at the next election. But interestingly, Grim Jim was over there on Channel 2 today, not telling them not to use the Chinese surveillance app of TikTok, instead saying, you know what, Dutton might be onto something here.
What do you think of Peter Dutton's idea, let those on job seeker work an extra 10 hours a fortnight before they lose their payments?
Well, getting more people into work was already a central feature of our economic plan before Peter Dutton started scratching around for something to say in budget week. You know, we've got 339,000 jobs created under the life of this Albanese government, not yet 12 months old. And we know we need to do a much better job of hooking people up with the opportunities of a job-creating economy.
And still on Peter Dutton's speech, remember we called out, and I think we did a reasonable job of this, calling this out on Thursday night about what the spin was going to be. That apparently to even say something about the 700,000 people coming to the country, and we don't care where they're from, what their skills are, culture, sexuality, colour, whatever, it doesn't matter, right? The question is, when you've got all the problems with our hospitals, school overcrowding and housing, the question that Peter Dutton was saying was quite a reasonable one, yet the media was out there spinning there was something nasty and semi-racist about it all. But Peter Dutton was just making an obvious point. Where the hell will 700,000 extra people live?
The Albanese government's Big Australia approach was never mentioned before the election, but it will make the cost of living crisis and inflation worse. Now, we all support a well-planned migration program, and that is the history of the coalition governments. But over 5 years, net overseas migration will see our population increase by 1.5 million people. It's the biggest migration surge in our country's history, and it's occurring at exactly the same time as a housing and rental crisis.
But as I said, rather than dealing with that very legitimate question, instead the warning flags went up from the political office of the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Desperate Duttons, attack lines are dynamite. The editorial in the Sydney Morning Herald itself the following day turned around and said there's no need to be afraid of big Australia. And as I pointed out, one of the greatest purveyors of clickbait about how bad the housing crisis is the Sydney Morning Herald. So for them to turn around and argue against their own saying of things, a little bit weird. Well, today, guess what they were back to? The truth. Sydney's most overcrowded schools breaching their student cap. And guess what would happen if you brought in an extra 700,000 people who eventually got family reunion and had to send their kids to the schools? They'd be even more overcrowded. But it's racist to talk about it.